What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. So, obviously, I'm in a different location entirely. I'm visiting family right now, and this is the best that I had to work with. So, forgive me for not having a great setup. Although I don't normally have a great setup, but this is particularly bad because I know that red wall behind me is just not great. But it's okay because we're here to talk about a movie that also is not great. So, anyways, this is The Eternals, or just Eternals, no the in front of it. And yeah, I had a chance to watch it. Heard a lot of stuff going into it and made me very interested to check it out because I heard from, there's certain people that are like, oh, this is a great movie, this is fantastic. There are some people that are like, this is an awful movie, it's the worst Marvel movie ever. And then there are some people that are like, this is one of those movies that's just so bad, it's kind of amazing to watch. So I was really curious to see what I would feel about it going into it. And having had a couple days now to sit on it, because I watched it a couple nights ago, and really think about what my thoughts are. It's definitely not good, but I wouldn't say it's awful either. It's just it is the worst Marvel movie. I will say that because I think back to what, in my opinion, are the worst Marvel movies before Eternals. You have Thor 2, Iron Man 2, Captain Marvel, and it just came down to overall, I didn't personally like the stories, I didn't like the villains. I felt like there's a lot about it that were, about those movies that were just too bland. But there's still some enjoyable stuff to it. I thought in Iron Man 2, there were still fun moments with Tony as Iron Man, kind of him figuring out how to heal himself and all of that. Thor 2, you had the scenes between Thor and Loki. That was a lot of fun. And then Captain Marvel, even though the villains themselves weren't great, I thought Jude Law was pretty fun. And just, some of the 90s stuff. So there were still elements in those that were fun and were inventive. The problem with Eternals, for me, without going too much into spoilers, is that there's a lot about it that could be fun if they explored it more. But in all honesty, they didn't. They didn't have time. There was so much to get through, so many characters to build up, so much backstory to build up. They didn't have time to explore some of these interesting ideas that were brought up in this movie. And in fact, I watched the pitch meeting for it, and he literally said what was on my mind about an hour into the movie. This could have been a great Disney Plus series. 6 hours long, an hour for each episode, and you would have plenty of time to flesh out these characters, flesh out the story, delve into some of these ideas that were being brought up but not fully tackled, and it would have been great. And I'm not somebody that I don't want to see movies go away. I love seeing stuff on the big screen. However, there are times when a streaming series in the MCU would do well. I think WandaVision utilized it very well. Loki, I thought, could have been a movie. The Eternals should have been a series. As much story and as much characters as they had to get through, it should have been a series. There should have been more time devoted to it to get us to care more. Because I think that was kind of the biggest problem for me, is just a lack of care, a lack of kind of conclusion for some of the stories that I felt like they were building up that just didn't go anywhere. So maybe they didn't have a plan. Maybe some of this stuff was just things they thought were interesting, but they didn't have an idea of how to tie it up and finish it out, and just sort of petered into nothing. But yeah, it felt very unfocused. It felt just like they didn't have a full plan for how to fit all of this into 2.5 hour movie. And that is still a lot of time, but I think they needed more to really get through all of this stuff. So, with that being said, now we're going to get into spoiler territory. So that is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen it, if you want to see it, stop watching here. If you have seen it, or if you just don't care and you want to find out what happens, well, let's get into it. So, yeah, the first, I would say about 15 minutes is just kind of building up the Eternals, who they are, basically their mission to destroy these deviants. And then from there, we kind of skip ahead, and they do kind of that out of order storytelling that it works in some movies, it does not in this one. For Batman, it kind of works because Nolan has this way of storytelling that it does sort of get you intrigued to see what's going to happen. This did not. This was, oh, okay, so they're sent here to kill these deviant things. That's cool. And then we see him kill a few of them, and then suddenly now we're just with Cersei and Sprite, and she's on a date, and Cersei and Sprite is there with her, and it just all of a sudden we're here. We're in modern day. Okay, and then we get the whole fight. Icarus comes in, saves them, and then we cut back and see Cersei and Icarus's love story being built up now. Even though we just saw her with another guy for like 5 minutes, now we're building this story, and then we cut back and we see she's reminiscing on that, and it's like, okay, so you're tying it together well, but the problem is I'm not really connecting with it. I'm not feeling what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you have a good reason why you're tying this stuff together. You got to make sure it connects with the audience, and I don't feel like they did that because they didn't give us enough time to really grasp on. And I don't mind making one character. Cersei pretty much is the main character in this movie. However, I feel like it would have been better if we got more time with everybody. Really delved into their stories a bit more. Because some of them just got shoved to the side. And it made them less, not necessarily less memorable, but less impactful on the story. Kingo, I think that's his name. I actually have their names pulled up right here because I'm not even going to try to remember all of their names. Kingo. A fun character. Really funny. His whole Bollywood section. Really funny. But then at the end of the story, what happens? He's like, I don't want to fight, guys. Peace out. And he's just not involved at all. It's just like, okay, why did we not do anything with him then? Why was he just out of the story? Fastus, I liked his character, but we don't get introduced to him until like the last 30 minutes of the movie. And we, honestly, I wish more TV shows and movies would take from what Marvel did with this, because he's a gay man, but guess what? Not focused on, not something that they, oh, guys, can you believe it? We're supporting you. They didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. It's just something they showed, and that's it. And I wanted to get to know more about him because that wasn't all his character was. He was so much more than that. He had more intrigue to him. His gadgets were really fun to watch and work with. The fight scene at the end, really enjoyed that as well. Gilgamesh and Athena. We get to see them introduced just a bit earlier than that, but we don't really get to see their story of why were they so connected. How did they get to this point where Gilgamesh kind of learned how to get this, I think it was called Mad Weary, how to get her out of that state. I feel like that would have been fun to see a bit more of, but instead cut ahead after seeing her freak out, and then she just seems to have it somewhat under control, and then things flip out again. It's just, I don't know, like, there's just so much there to unpack in all of these different stories, and we just don't get any of it. We don't get that feeling of, we've seen the story built up, and then here's the conclusion. A lot of it just sort of feels like it's sort of pushed to the wayside. So, I'll try to tackle it bit by bit, because I know I'm kind of bouncing from character to character, but that's kind of what the movie does, and it's hard to keep it all focused when the movie was so unfocused on what it wanted to be. So first of all, Cersei, Sprite, and Icarus. Those three, I didn't really connect with that. Again, they started off Cersei with this other guy, and then we see their love story, and then we find out about Icarus betraying Ajax and killing her and all of this stuff, and then we find out apparently Sprite loves him, which I'm not going to lie, I was worried about, because I've seen some people start to push this whole idea of a minor attracted person, and I was really worried that we were going to see Hollywood start to try to push this idea too with Sprite, because I know she's not technically a minor, because she's lived for thousands of years as well, but you've cast a minor to play this role. So push aside the movie, I was worried we were going to have to watch this kid kiss this older guy, and I was just going to be like, no, I'm out. I'm done. Thankfully, they don't go that far. They just, they talk about the fact that she loves him. And I don't know, I didn't really get that feeling until Kingo brought it up. I didn't feel like there was a love connection there. And part of that probably is down to the fact that I don't look at a kid and an older man and think, oh, they're in love. So maybe that's just me, but it just kind of looked like she saw him like an older brother. And then when Kingo points it out later, we're like, Peter Pan and Wendy, and you're like Tinkerbell, and Tinkerbell always loves Peter. I was just like, okay, I guess this is a story now. And the only reason they really did that was just so she would turn against the team whenever Icarus turned against the team. And that's basically the only reason for that. So it just felt kind of pointless. Again, Cersei and Icarus's romance in general was just kind of there. I didn't really feel for it, especially when we start this movie with she's seeing this guy. You've already started us off with, no, she is seeing this other guy, and they seem to be hitting it off pretty well. And then you all of a sudden throw in, like, no, they had a great love story, guys. Like, let's show you this love story now. Why am I supposed to care about this? And can we just say also the beginning of their love story was a little awkward? They wake up, oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? I'm Icarus. I'm sassy. Which I can't be the only one that thought she said I'm sassy, right? A little weird. But just, she looks at the earth, it's beautiful, and he's just like, I'm Icarus. Why don't you acknowledge what she said first? Instead of just, hey, here's my name. So, but yeah, they build up this whole love story, and then it doesn't really go anywhere. He ends up turning against them anyway, even though he supposedly loves her so much. And then, again, their stories just end very oddly. We see Cersei is she's only able to control inanimate objects, non-living things, and turn them into something else. And then suddenly she can do more than that. She turns a deviant into a tree. Why? I don't know. She's nearly at death, and then all of a sudden she can do it. And then that's when they're like, oh, well, if you can do that to a deviant, surely you can do that to a celestial. And then they get this whole idea about, connecting their mind and the Unimind, and all I'm thinking is the Unimind from Buzz Lightyear, the animated cartoon, way back when, because the little green men, they have their Unimind thing that connects them all, and that's all I could think about for the entire movie. Please tell me I'm not the only one that remembers that movie, because that movie was fantastic. But so they have this idea. That's what they're going to do. They're going to connect. They're going to give their power to Druig, and he's going to put the Celestial to sleep. But then that doesn't work because Icarus stops him, so then they give all of their power to her because the Celestial connects them. So this is something else that I have an issue with, because this Celestial Tiamat is supposed to be the one that wakes up out of the Earth's core, blows up the Earth, and then creates all these other worlds. So it wakes up, and the first thing it does is connect all of these Eternals that are trying to put it to sleep. Druig tries to put it to sleep, and then Cersei tries to turn it to marble. And yet, it still connects them anyway. It's like, here you go. Here's this power to defeat me. Now you're all connected. And maybe it just does it, but they didn't really make that apparent. They made it sound like Tiamat decided to connect them together. And that's what destroyed him. And I just like, okay, so did he want to get destroyed, or did he not have a choice? Because you didn't make that clear to me. But then Icarus just, I guess out of guilt, it's like, you know what? I'm going to go up to my namesake because you named me Icarus, so I guess I got to fly into the sun. It's the only reason he did it. Because he didn't have to kill himself. Honestly, he could have helped, because at the end of the movie, sure enough, Airsham shows up. He's like, no, you're not going to do this. Would have been great if Icarus didn't decide to kill himself. And then Sprite is just like, I'm tired of being a kid. Somehow, because reasons, Cersei's like, I still have some latent power in me. I can turn you into a human. Because, yes, turning living things into inanimate objects, like a tree or like marble, means suddenly you can turn a sentient robot, like an Eternal, into a human. Because all of these powers that you have so connect, makes perfect sense. They just turned her into a wish granter, because everybody needs a freaking happy ending, right? So yeah, their story, really dumb. Also, just a minor note, something that just popped into my head. So Cersei gets stabbed by Sprite. Stabs her in the back, and she heals. How? Just sort of happened. She gets stabbed. It seems like she's done, and then suddenly Druid comes up and knocks out Sprite, and then she's just like, "All right, I'm good." Turns the knife to water, and then she's good. And then later on, in the later scene when Icarus shows up to try to stop her, you see the wound literally heal up. Don't know how that happened, but it did. So, that's their story. Didn't really get into it, and those were kind of our main three that they focused on. And then you get, I'll talk about Gilgamesh and Athena. They were okay. Gilgamesh was probably one of my favorites just because he had some really good lines and really good moments interacting with everybody. So I really like their story. Athena with this whole thing, she's going crazy because she has so many memories. Didn't really go anywhere. They bring up this idea like, oh, she's got so many memories that she can't stand it. But why isn't anybody else dealing with that? And then they're like, oh, no, that was actually a glitch. Whenever they reset your memories, yours glitched for some reason. So now you can remember a past life. Don't know why, but okay. Let's just go with that. It suddenly stops. It just, out of nowhere. She's dealing with it. Gilgamesh dies, and suddenly, not a problem. She deals with it in the cave once, and instantly overcomes it to defeat this deviant that's been morphing. And just goes away. It's not a problem anymore. They don't even really talk about it anymore. Just plot point, done. Don't talk about how to defeat it. Don't talk about how to overcome it. You just do it, right? You just do it. Shia LaBeouf would be proud. And yeah, Gilgamesh just dies. And I kind of hate it because I like their chemistry. It wasn't really a romantic thing. It was just a good, nice bond between these two where you really feel like Gilgamesh cares about her and wants to see her protected. And she really appreciates everything he's done to help her. And I liked it. And then they kill him off. And I'm just like, okay, well, now that's done. Great. I don't know if I should talk about the Deviant now that killed Gilgamesh or not. Because that kind of ties in a little bit. I'll go ahead and talk about it. So yeah, this Deviant thing. Probably the biggest piece of wasted potential, in my opinion, for this movie. Because this idea of, are the Deviants and the Eternals so different? Because basically the Deviants, I don't know why they kept getting created, because it sounds like Arishem realized, wait a minute, these are actually not a good thing, because they're evolving and they're actually taking out intelligent life as well, and we need intelligent life to thrive. So now we're sending in the Eternals that don't evolve. But we see this one Deviant has the ability to suck out their powers. Don't know why this one in particular does. Don't know if it's just because it killed an Eternal and this is the first time that's happened. I don't know. But we're seeing this thing evolve to the point where it's basically becoming a humanoid just like an Eternal. It's sucking their power, but it's also sucking their essence. Kind of an interesting concept. What does that mean? What makes this Deviant... Do they all have the ability to suck out the Eternal's power, or is it just this one? Are they so different between the two of them? Are they both robots, or are the Deviants just these beast-like creatures? What does all this mean? It doesn't matter. None of that matters, because it doesn't go anywhere. Athena has a moment in the cave where it suddenly starts talking to her like it's Gilgamesh, and she has that flashback thing, and she's about to get the essence drained out of her, and then she just turns and kills it, and then it's done. Nothing. Absolutely nothing done with it. Potential wasted. So yeah, it was frustrating. I feel like they really could have done some more interesting exploring into the Deviants and why, is there a different reason why Arishem kept creating them after he realized they weren't actually doing anything to help? I don't know. It just... nothing. Again, just nothing came of it. So, pretty frustrated there. Talk about Kingo now, because again, his story was just very. I don't get it. It was done for laughs at first because he became a Bollywood star, and I found that funny. But then he just really had no effect on the plot. He just spouted some exposition a couple times, and then he just leaves before the final battle. So I don't really understand what his point was for the story. Druig, however, kind of liked his take on things because it was a different feel where he was an antagonistical character throughout most of the movie because he just kind of saw humans as like we want to protect them, right? Well, they need protecting from themselves because they're just going to create war. And there's some interesting commentary there with yeah, we as humans tend to fight a lot. We tend to pick fights more often than not. So yeah, this idea of he has the ability to just control them and make them live peaceful lives, but that's also taking away their free will. So it's kind of an interesting topic of discussion to bring up. And on top of that, he did provide an antagonist for a minute, um, which of course led to Icarus is the actual antagonist because he just wants to follow Erishim's orders. So it was basically just a way to make us think he was going to be the bad guy for a little bit, and then turns out Icarus is. But yeah, I liked his character though. Is he was pretty interesting, just to see his development and see him kind of realize that he's in the wrong. He's not really giving them peace, even though they're not fighting, because he's essentially just controlling them, and that's not real peace. So I like what they did with him, and I feel like they did a good job of kind of building that story. And I wish again we could have taken a little bit more time with it because his turnaround was pretty quick. Um, but I did like kind of that realization for him. Um, Although I will say it didn't help because obviously there are characters that are already like DC characters. They cast somebody that looks pretty close to Ezra Miller, so I look at him and I just kept seeing Credence from Fantastic Beasts. Not so much Barry Allen. His haircut and everything really made him seem like Credence. Um, but yeah, I really liked his character though. And then again, Festus gets introduced, and I do wish we could have gotten more time with him because we see this scene where he's seeing, the bombs being dropped on Japan after, at the end of World War II. And he, of course, is the one who's designing these machinery things, and that was one of his designs that he gave, and he realized what an awful thing. And it kind of tied in pretty interestingly with um, Oppenheimer, how he kind of regretted what he did in the Manhattan Project. So I kind of like that little tie-in. Although this is the second time where it kind of feels like they almost want us as Americans to feel bad about what we did in Japan, even though we didn't do any. Like we ourselves are not the ones that, helped with building the bombs and dropped them, and it did help end a war. And I don't know, like Legends of Tomorrow did it too, where they're almost like, shame on you, America, for dropping those bombs on Japan. Shame on you. I mean, I know they attacked Pearl Harbor and all, but shame on you. It just seems weird that they're doing it again. But I would have liked to see he goes from that point where he's ashamed of what he created and seeing the destruction that it caused. And honestly, you could say that about a lot of stuff he built, because he probably built a lot of the weaponry that led to some of these wars and led to easier ways to kill people. I think this was kind of the crowning moment, and I feel like it could have been shown very well how he just keeps seeing the things he's trying to build to help slowly turned for evil and turned for war and to kill people. See that happen, and then boom, atomic bomb dropped. See the crowning moment of how much death and destruction his creations can bring, and then slowly turn around when he finds, this family that he truly loves, and that's kind of his spark to have hope for humanity again. I feel like that could have been an interesting story in and of itself, but unfortunately, we get a small clip of him crying after the bombs dropped, and then cut to he's with his family, and he's just talking about, yeah, they're my light now. They're what gave me hope. Could we have seen it though? Please. And that's again, take more time to develop that story because that's a great story to tell, but you didn't tell it. You did tell it. You could have showed it. it would have been so much more interesting for us to get to experience that instead of just hear him tell the story about, oh, I found my family and now I'm good. It just missed opportunities, so many missed opportunities. So, I like his character and I liked the inventions and stuff. Honestly, seeing him fight in the final scene was a lot of fun. It kind of reminded me. It's weird that there are a lot of similarities between these two, but I'm thinking about Curtis from Arrow. It's weird that they are both gay black men in Arrow and then in Eternals. But the thing about it is, Curtis wanted to be a fighter, but he never could be. He was never really that good at fighting. Phastos, when he started to fight, it was cool. I enjoyed him getting into the fight, using these gadgets and stuff to pin down basically Superman, Icarus. It was pretty badass. So I really enjoyed his fighting scenes and just seeing how he utilized the cool little gadgets and inventions and stuff. And then we end with, hang on, my phone went to sleep. What's her name? Makari. And she's the last one that shows up because apparently she was just hiding out in their ship this whole time for whatever reason. Her story could have been more interesting. It just feels like they forgot about her until the last moment. They're just like, yeah, we'll just have her be waiting on the ship for everybody. I feel like could have done something more interesting with that because she's deaf but has super speed. Could have been cool to see. Could have been interesting to see why her being deaf does it help. She talks about at one point in one of the flashbacks how she can sense vibrations. So I'm just like, okay, so how does that work? She's deaf, but she can still feel stuff happening, even though she can't hear it. I kind of like that, but we don't get anything about it. We just get those small scenes, and then she just appears at the end. Super badass as well. Again, she was another one that was taking on Icarus by herself and was just taking him down constantly. So, another character that I feel like not quite as interesting as Phastos is and seeing his progression, or even Druig. But I feel like for her, we could have gotten a bit more character development about her powers and how she can use them and stuff. I feel like that could have been fun as well to get more time with her. But anyways, so that's about it for all of the characters. There's a lot of them. Ajak, don't even really get much with her. She dies early on, and we get to see a little bit of her as a team leader, but not much. So there's not really much character for her there. But yeah, it's just kind of a small thing. Apparently she was all for turning against Arisham's plan as well. But I guess I'll end kind of my two main things that when I look back, I'm going to remember having the biggest issues with this. First of all, for Arisham, there's a lot that I feel like doesn't make sense about him as a character. First of all, one of his plans is we want human life to thrive on these planets because the more intelligent life thrives, the more power is given to the celestial inside the planet, which allows them to awaken. Makes sense. Until you think about the fact that Thanos wiped out half of the population, in which case that goes against their plan because they need more human life. So why wouldn't the Eternals have stepped in? Because that interferes with their plan. And on top of that, apparently Thanos was an Eternal as well. So possibly, I don't really know if that's the case or if they're doing something different. But there's a lot of issues there, and just the fact that he has a direct communication with one of the team, he should be able to sense and tell whenever they're going against it. Whenever they're trying to turn Tiamat to marble at the end. At that point, he should be like, no. You're not going to stop the Celestial. And sure, he comes in at the end and he's just like, okay, well, you've decided to sacrifice, this Celestial for human life. We'll judge you and see if you're correct. And then takes them all away. But why didn't he stop them beforehand? Did he really just want to see, like, okay, let's see if they can do it. Okay, they did it. Now let's find out if they made a good decision or not. It just seems a little weird, and it seems like his motivations are not all together there. And maybe we'll find out more about him later on, but it just feels like he was sort of there as this ominous presence that we didn't get a whole lot about, and then by the end of the movie, I still don't know a whole lot about him. So I feel like, again, something else we could have delved in a bit more if we had more time with all of these characters. And then finally, probably the strangest part, and is why it's going to stick with me, is because it's so strange. Yeah, Harry Styles. I don't mind having Harry Styles in the MCU. I don't care. It's whatever. I'm not. I don't hate One Direction as much as some people do. I don't like them at all. But whatever. You want to have Harry Styles in the MCU? Sure, go ahead. As Thanos' brother, though. No. No. God. Just no. All sorts of no. Just no. So yeah, I mean that's kind of everything. I can't think of anything else that comes to mind to talk about. But I don't know, just it was a mess. It was a huge mess. And again, most of the Marvel's movies that I look at and I'm just like, those were not as good. I can still think of moments that I'm like, that was good, that was enjoyable. For this, anything that was good, most of the time I look back on it and think, but it could have been better. I wish I'd gotten more. I wish I'd gotten to see it a bit more. I wish I'd gotten more time to see it developed. It just felt like there was a lot of wasted potential with this movie. That could have been a series, could have been a show, and maybe they just didn't want to do the big budget thing into a series. But I don't know. When you've got this many new characters, this much story to unpack, you're basically going from the beginning of time until now. It feels like there's something that could be done to say, hey, can we maybe film this into like a 6-hour thing and break it down into a series? I know it's not as big of a deal to see a series of it, but we've got a lot of story here. I don't know. It's disappointing, really. So, anyways, that was a nice long talk about this. There's a lot to get off my chest. I've been kind of sitting and dwelling on this for the past couple of days, so it's good to finally release it and just say, here's my thoughts. So, with all that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on this movie? Let me know, we can talk about and discuss all the good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe. Future Marvel products and properties. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.